SC Media and our sponsor, Fortinet, are proud to present this month's CISO Stories program. Hosted by yours truly, Jess Hoffman, this is the show where CISOs share tales from the trenches and unpack leadership lessons learned along the way. Find this month's CISO Stories content at CISOstoriespodcast.com. The Cyber Risk Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit CISOstoriesPodcast.com/CRC. Greetings, everybody. Welcome back for another week's episode of CISO Stories Podcast. You got myself, Jess Hoffman, with you in the house, and so's my buddy, Adam John, all the way from B-More. What's up, Adam? How you doing?
I'm good, Jess. How are you doing today?
Amazing. I was about to say you're a Ravens fan, but you're a Steelers fan. I'll be freaking.
I'm a Steelers fan. I'm a transplant of excellence into the city.
Oh my. Okay. You know what? This is over right now. I don't know why I started like that. But thank you for joining us, Adam. You know, we've been cool for quite some time back in the day. So, you know, I really appreciate you telling us all about your experience with cloud security today. So that's our theme for this month. And, you know, it's pretty prevalent now. Everybody's using the cloud or some hybrid of it. A lot of businesses don't even know or don't really care, right, what services they're using, especially these small, medium-sized businesses. So I know you've been a CISO for larger companies as well as smaller companies. So let's talk about that for a little bit. Can you share some experiences and thoughts on how small, medium businesses, how they approach cloud security, or when they choose to identify a SaaS or a service in a cloud? What is it that they're looking for?
So it's just easeability, reducing that barrier to work, right? IT infrastructure is expensive on-site, even off-site's not that cheap, but that they don't have the expertise to bring on to run their email system or run a website or run anything like that, like SharePoint. SharePoint's extremely difficult. Even Google Docs, even though it's pared down in functionality from the Microsoft product, is still extensive in its requirements and like things it needs to work on. So, but they're easy to set up. You go register your LLC, whatever, you go set up a domain somewhere and you go to Microsoft or Google and they'll have a step-by-step guide on how to set up and you're ready. And so it's easy, it's quick, it's dirty. And unfortunately, a lot of these companies don't realize the potential pitfalls that they may be jumping into by doing it this way.
So the ease of it all, the scalability too, right? You just made me think about like Ticketmaster with the Snowflake, although Ticketmaster is obviously not a small business, but they were susceptible more or less. I mean, there was some behind the scenes as far as some of those clients or Snowflake didn't incorporate any multi-factor, which was a customer preference, so to speak. But at the same time, you're still inheriting from that third party, which in our discussion here, we're talking about cloud. So that's one. What else have you seen that is very advantageous or even challenging for small, medium businesses when they choose a SaaS or ultimately a cloud service provider?
Well, the advantage to it is it seems you're on site, you're on station immediately, and it kind of gives that illusion of presence, like you've been in the field before, you've kind of been around for a while. So particularly customers or potential clients who aren't really in the know, they might not realize that you've only been around for 5 minutes and not 20 years. So it does kind of add to that illusion of presence for the company, even though like many of these small companies that work out of a house like I am today. So it's not some brick and mortar institution in some high rise somewhere. But it gives that corporate kind of polish that people kind of look for. Pitfalls, though, there's contractual requirements. That's the first thing that usually comes up as an issue. I do primarily government contracting. I've worked with some of the biggest systems in Medicare, and as you know, you've made sure those systems are secure.
Yes, you were a pain in my butt for a long time. But here we are now.
That's right. But lot of times these small companies, like I've come in more recently doing virtual CISO work, and even before that in house, is they don't understand that they don't know. You don't know what you don't know, right? And that's usually one of the biggest dangers that can befall a company, is they haven't set up. It's good to go. It's, well, Google Docs and Microsoft are the two biggest ones. They're not necessarily in alignment with even ISO or CMMC or even HIPAA if you're doing HIPAA stuff, or the various contractual requirements. And when you're a small shop and even a medium shop, there's not enough personnel to have eyes on everything, and people will just sign on the dotted line without even thinking about it. So that's, yeah, we got it. Don't worry. And there's this illusion that nobody will ever check. That is slowly starting to fade away. We're having, especially in the DoD world, is obviously CMMC just got codified, and it requires checks. Level 1's a self-assessment, but level 2, a lot of companies are finding out really quickly that they fall into level 2, not just level 2 self-assessment. They're falling into level 2, C3PO assessment. They have to have that additional layer, and they're not ready for it. And they do these self-assessments, and they just check a box. Oh, we do that, because they don't understand what they don't know. So that's where things like having a dedicated personnel that they don't have come into play. A lot of these people do not have virtual CISOs. You can look my number up, and I'm glad to talk to you, but you should have something in place to manage this kind of security. You need staff that can do it. And we're even finding out outside the DoD world, I think it's CIO SB4 is the GWAC that's coming online I think it's being either under bid right now. It requires CMMC, and that is for the civilian side of the federal market. And on top of that, all these contractual requirements flow down, right? So, facility security, well, let's say you have, your office or whatever, your building. Does your cleaning crew, are they checked? Is the building itself, are their physical systems checked? What else do you rely on? It's all this complexity that you really need good, security leadership and legal leadership to be able to look at this stuff and review it. So,
digital migration to the cloud is essential for businesses to remain competitive, but this shift introduces many new security and operational challenges, especially as the number of clouds and applications increase, rapidly expanding your attack surface for cyber threats to exploit. Organizations need a way to unify these increasingly diverse and vulnerable environments. Fortinet Cloud Security Solutions help you secure your application journeys into, within, and across any cloud. I love that. You said illusion was like a pro and a con. The illusion that, the company's stable, has backing as far as the time. And that's one of the, that's something that we look at when we're buying products, especially, right? We want to make sure that a company's established, a vendor's established, because we don't want to buy a $300,000 product or even a $5,000 product from a company that could potentially go under any minute, right? And what's up with our data? So I think that's a great pro that, because of the easeability and scalability of cloud, we're able to leverage that to show a solid presence, that illusion, as you said. And then the con, is the illusion that, we're take care of it, you're fine, just sign here, don't worry about security, don't worry about anything else, we'll back you up, don't worry about it, kind of thing. So that's I like how you describe that, because illusion could be like, it's a good thing and could be a bad thing if you're not, you're eluding yourself, right? You're not doing your due diligence. And you also mentioned about having the appropriate staff in place, which I think that's one of the biggest differences with small and medium businesses, right? They typically don't have IT, let alone cyber staff that are like full-time. And even to contract out, I'm sure you're very expensive as a virtual CISO. So how can they even keep up with that, when they're going through these transitions? What'd you say?
I'm willing to deal with you. For you, I have a friends and family discount.
Friends and family discount. Okay.
But
CISO Stories, /Adam
right.
John discount.
But I mean, you don't
Yeah.
need it full time, right? So something like me, like a virtual CISO, if you're HIPAA, you have to have a CISO. Under CMMC, you should. It's kind of gone back and forth about whether you actually need the role, but you need someone who does this for part of your job. Even if it's like 10, 20 hours a month, the hourly might not be the cheapest thing, but it's cheaper than a full time in person, and it's you can usually get um, you can usually get a decent work out of it. But it's the reviews, it's that knowledge of like what does this really mean? We used to go back and forth all the time about controls. What does this really mean? And are we really meeting it just to check a box, or are we really doing it just to make the system better, right? So that's that kind of knowledge is paramount, and people need to have that.
So
And, hmm?
you're triggering me there talking about security doesn't equal compliance. Well, I'm sorry to cut you off, but just what advice have you given some of your clients with these smaller businesses when they want to get a product, and maybe they are like a very small down the food chain, vendor for military, contract, and have to adhere to CMMC on some level. Like what advice would you tell them when they fit into everything we just said? They don't have full time, maybe they can afford to outsource some of the security, or some of their IT, or they have to, but they have to be in compliance with CMMC. What advice would you give them when they're looking for products, which pretty much everything is in the cloud at this point?
So first off, what they're looking for is the first thing you got to think about is the strategic plan, right? So what do I need to accomplish, and what are my primary goals, right? So from that, you build what you need. The problem is from that is people don't really do that, and they just see an ad for something like, oh, that's good for me, that's good for me. That sprawl of where's my data, where's it go, blah blah blah, and you log in, make your account, then you tell, oh, what's your Microsoft account? You hit the button, and then it hooks into O365 or Google and has access to your data. So that having a strategic and measured plan of what you need, what you actually need, and then also understand what you already have, so that you're not buying two tools of the same thing. Maybe not rely on a new fancy tool that the old tool still does the work. Maybe it's not as slick or pretty, but it's less cost, and you know where your data's at, right? If you can get it, if you can go through an MSP or an MSSP, I would advise to do that. Again, all this work to do for CMMC, even the first 17 controls, can be very seemingly easy, but to know what to do in the various control panels, that's a lot of work. That's a full-time person. I can't do it. I can farm it out to a service provider or a security service provider, but you have to have due diligence there as well. I've run into so many MSPs and MSSPs that they'll sell you anything, any snake oil they want, and they just ask that you don't ask, So in their contractual work, all right, I'm gonna farm this out to you, but you have to be able to meet these things. You have to be audited when we say. You have to be, you have to take that risk on with me for when these big contractors, the GDs or KPMG or whatever, they come down, they needed a small. I looked the part, they hired me on, and now they're asking. So that flows down. They need to be able to know it.
You bring it back
a lot of them are not
memories.
ready for it. A lot of these companies rely on, like, one of the big XDRs, Sentinel-1 or CrowdStrike, and like, oh, we have it. And they don't. They just install this thing, and that's not even fully configured, right? And so I have to do a forensic check. I have to, is my license correct? What do I need to do? You're relying on them, so you got to do those checks.
Well, what about the cloud security piece, or just the cloud piece? Do you go for these small, medium-sized businesses that have to adhere to CMMC? And you just gave a really good example, and you and I both know just from like the way the government contracts work, there's a prime, and then there's a bunch of subs, which the subs are usually the minority-owned business, women-owned business, veteran-owned business. They're 8A businesses, all those things. HubZone, pick it.
Oh yeah.
But how are they when they're choosing products? Do they ask? And I guess I'm just curious too. I mean, is it that are we asking these cloud service providers and these vendors, hey, give me your CMMC compliance report, or we're not there yet, right? Or what does that look
No,
like?
you can ask for like ISO, or if they have some sort of conformance statements to FISMA, or especially FISMA. Some people have like the beginnings of their CMMC. There, so if you log into Microsoft, you log into Google, you log into Amazon, they'll actually have a page that says this is what we have, PCI, whatever, and it's there. You can pull it down. And the important part of that is it'll tell you what you do and what they do. I think one of your previous um, guests had talked about that before, but they talk about what you do and what they do. And you have to meet in the middle. And if you don't know what they're talking about, they actually have pretty good explanations of like, well, this is how you do it. Now you can buy them or do something else. If you're in the Fed world, especially in the DoD world, DISA, NSA, even Homeland, they actually have some pretty good programs now. CISA actually has some good stuff available to help you understand on your journey to get to where you need to go. So they have webinars, they have workshops. So don't be afraid to do it. There's also a lot of groups out there. There's a tremendous amount of groups. I actually help with an incubator here in Maryland, and what we're doing is we're setting up our own O365 tenants service, because these smalls, they come in, they start up, they have this great idea, they work day and night, they're countless hours to get this off the ground, and then they go to sell, and their IP's already been stolen, and it's being sold by somewhere else in the world, and it's
Yeah.
pennies on a dime, or pennies on a dollar, I guess that's the term, and it's not good for them. But they're also getting now these requirements from their clients, like, are you doing this? And they have no idea. They're a 3-person shop, and 3 laptops, spread throughout the country. So that look at these resources, your chamber, your local innovation centers, things like that. Usually they have something or trying to start something up. And if they don't have anything, ask them about it. Say, hey, this would be great. That might kick something off where they're starting to provide a service that will allow other companies to come to them, which will make them more valuable to the government side.
That's such a great point. Oh my goodness, I'm drawing a blank, but we're gonna come back to that. But yes, just small, medium-sized businesses, the wealth of support and knowledge that's out there right now. We had a guest, Tim Ball, who's from ISAC. I gotta look it up, but he was talking about that. And do you know Tim? Tim
I've
Ball?
met Tim once. He probably has no idea who I am, though.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So you probably saw him at DEF CON too, but yeah, that's what his company specializes in. Actually, nonprofit, excuse me. But what you just said about your incubator support to have Microsoft 365, which we know is a cloud service, right? Microsoft,
Yep.
everybody knows who Microsoft is, for better, for worse. They're not immune to any attacks, obviously. But that's a great point. Just as far as like some of these businesses that don't have those resources on hand, there's still resources available from them, whether it's the federal government or local government, to ensure that they have cloud security, access control, everything else under the sun there. So what other cons do you see or have you seen in your journey as CISO, VCISO when dealing with small businesses, small, medium-sized businesses? Specifically when it comes to cloud security, we talked about the contract requirements, and making sure everybody understands what their roles and responsibilities are. But what else? What other advice would you give some of these businesses?
Be careful how many admins you have. That's a basic question. But small companies, everyone's a global admin in Microsoft. It's kind of terrifying to come in and see that. And so they'll make changes. Understand that most of these companies do not understand that you're responsible for backups. So if you hit with ransomware, it's in the contract. You are responsible for backups. So where does it come from? Microsoft has its own service now that they'll gladly peddle. There's other stuff out there that's, I think, better. Cloud services. So when you're small, you usually have people bring their own laptops. It's BYOD world. Understand that risk. So these people connected to your cloud environments, and so how do you control that protection? How do you control your data from moving off and not being stolen? Uh, I had a client that they had somebody, they needed a developer, so they went on, I think WeWork or something. It may not have been WeWork. I'm not trying to like disparage WeWork, but they gave them full access to their repo, all their code repos, and the guys took it all and blanked out all their data. And he's in a country that no extradition or real legal treaties with the United States. It's gone. They had no backup, and the data's gone, and they have nothing. Years of work are gone. So what are you going to do? But a lot of it is kind of being honest with yourself. Like I said, a lot of people in CMMC, I keep coming back to that. That's going to be kind of for government contractors, which is a huge environment. Which even though Elon says we're going to lose $2 trillion of government, there's a lot of services there that those agencies provide. So there's a possibility that there may be even more of a shift of certain functionalities moving to contracting, like in the 80s was such a big deal. So there might be some more work that way. So you just got to understand these roles and these rules are coming down to you. That's just a big thing to remember. And people are like, no, it's not okay. Well, I'm like, look at your contract. Is there a defarce clause? It's a 2-line piece of work. You will do this.
Yeah.
3.1.4.3, whatever. I don't care.
Not
what does
you
that
call
mean?
it Elon by his first name. Is that your buddy, man? What's up? Elon, what's up, man? What's going on?
I have no Starlink. I have no ties, or I have no money in the Elon businesses. So
yeah, okay, you got no skin in the game. But that's an interesting point, though. Like you said, I mean, who knows with this new administration? But clearly there's going to be some reductions in some of our government services. I'd hate to be working for the health right now. God bless all you people.
It's also state governments, right?
Yeah.
What do I need to know? Like I said, know thy system, know thy regulation, right? So there's the federal world. Okay, well, there's also a FedRAMP. Well, there's also state RAMP. Do you deal with states? There's state RAMP. There's privacy CCPA. Tennessee has a law. Texas has a law. Colorado's law. Massachusetts has a law. Virginia's law. How are you doing that?
And all the privacy laws, yeah, absolutely, which are not consistent across the states or the world, right? We didn't even talk about global ones, right?
If you can get a decent GRC product, if you can afford one, the big players out there are out there, and they're $100,000, $200,000 a year. I understand no one can pay that. There's actually other ones that are a couple $100 a month. If you can swing that, they're getting a little bit more powerful. So, but again, it'll give you a framework. Like, okay, I have to do this. Oh crap. Okay. And especially when the auditor comes in, if you have one of these tools, which I just said, watch your sprawl, but this is something you should think of as part of your strategic plan, is using one of these tools. When the auditor comes in, it makes things a lot less painful. They know where everything's at, or if you followed it correctly. It usually has a lot of guidance of like, okay, hey, did you do this? Did you do this check? Right? It'll send you an annoying email or even text messages, some of these tools. Like, did you do this today? Because this is due every month. You got to do it. You got to prove that's being done, right? That kind of security. This is going to, if your partners don't want to pay for a security person or someone to review stuff, the annoyance of these email will make them understand the value of these positions. They're important. It needs to be done. And, there you go.
So it sounds like your professional opinion as far as strategic planning and guidance for small, medium-sized businesses when they're in the market for whether it's a specific cloud service provider like the Googles and the Microsofts and so forth, or a SaaS product that is typically AWS powered, need to the most important thing is to understand what regulatory requirements that your organization, your data must follow.
Can they meet it? But also, how do they meet it? Because a lot of salespeople tell you anything. So ask for that performance statement, right? I mean, I had a small doctor practice, and they had a piece of hardware, medical hardware, and there's a performance document. FDA requires. They didn't have it.
What's a
And
performance document?
it's a conformance document. So
Oh,
it's conforming
conformance.
to
Excuse
certain
me.
regulations that basically it can be patched.
Okay.
The data's not being sent somewhere. Um, I won't. That kind of thing, right? Doing these fly by night. I had a company that did radiology, and they picked this company, and their readers were all in India, and your data goes to India. It's not a good thing, right? Now that got stopped before we started. They started using the service, but they're like, "Well, what's wrong with using India?" I'm like, "Well, if the data goes there and they use it nefariously, we have no recourse." So just think about that. Just think about it again. It
Yeah,
comes back to where your
that's
data is at and
another.
how it's protected.
Pretty much follow the data. It's like follow the money, follow the data,
Yep.
right? Just a quick plug to, yeah, making sure that your vendors, and we talked about, I think October was our um, tool selection
Mm.
month theme for the month, which was really great. And I love to see how all of our month's discussions really come together, because we talked a lot about that already, right? Some of the things we talked about before, incident response with the backups, knowing what services you're getting. Most clouds don't back up automatically. We had a guest that talked about
Yep.
that too. You just mentioned that. BYOD, some of these allow you to have multiple subscriptions on uh, uh, BYOD devices, so it doesn't have to be necessarily corporate issued. So making sure that you're not allowing or maybe you do allow your workforce to log into their Office 365 from their personal devices, which may or may not be in your control, right?
Yep.
Um, yeah, and the regulatory. But you just made me think about something really important. It's something when we were at CMS. If you took your laptop overseas, or you accessed your email overseas from your
Yep.
BlackBerry or whatever, you were fired. It doesn't matter, if you
Yep.
were, 20 years in, prestigious, or somebody who worked, admin or intern, you're straight fired. So we did not allow our workforce to be outside the country accessing the organization's data or department's data, nor do you allow to have vendors that are storing, transmitting, or processing federal data or government data outside of the United States. Offshoring, that was prohibited. There's such a blurred line there. And
Mhm.
I think that's probably one of the questions I don't think many people even ask,
Yeah.
you know?
A lot of people rely on these. This is cheaper. I mean, some of these people are just technically as proficient as anybody else, but their rates are a lot less. And it comes down to
Exactly.
knowing the contract. So if you have a contract and you're sending to a lawyer, make sure that lawyer has some cyber experience or has a cyber lawyer. They're out there now. And trust me, it's just like a vegan or, how do you know they do cyber law? They will tell you they do cyber law. So make sure that's there.
What is cyber law?
Yeah,
I think that's fascinating. But yeah, that's so new. We had a lawyer on, Joe Sullivan was on back in September and kind of picked his brain. So thank you for giving a shout out to the legal team, because they're super critical here
oh yes.
with all things.
I said,
Yeah.
unless you have a JD behind your name, a lot of stuff doesn't carry weight with certain groups. So having that lawyer look after it, and this either role, either the virtual CISO, or they work with the legal team. So if you do have a CISO or a virtual CISO, and they don't have connection to your legal group, even if it's external, that's not going to work. So they need to go back and forth in contracts, understanding of different rules, because they're seeing it from two different perspectives of how things should work. And a lawyer's only about risk. How do I reduce my risk? A CISO is mostly risk, but it's more risk based in the technological and the data world. So it's like, that's great that you're doing this, but you still got to be, the risk is reduced, but it doesn't work. Like, right? It's like coming down to TPO and HIPAA. Where operations, if you're an operations group, you're handling the data somehow. The lawyer just say, don't allow it on your network, don't allow it on your computer. It's like, well, that doesn't happen. The CISO is more the realist in the conversation there. Like, okay, well, we know what you want in the real world, but it's a little bit different.
I don't think I've ever heard CISO as the realist, but I like that. So we're wrapping up here. First, let me just say, I mentioned earlier when we were talking about resources for small, medium businesses, couldn't remember the ISAC. It's NGO ISAC, and it's for nonprofits who are looking for cybersecurity support. So check them out online. Tim Ball is the CISO there and one of the founding members. So shout out to them, doing great work. And they're mostly in the DMV area too. Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you for that. And also Adam apparently has some stuff going on too. So where can folks find you, Adam?
I am online on LinkedIn. Twitter is a little weird for me. I do a little bit in Sage on 76 Twitter. LinkedIn, I'm just n/ajon because I was one of the first people on LinkedIn, amazingly, a long time ago. If you can find me there.
All right. Well, last question for all the guests. Sounds like you might know what I'm going to say already if you listen to some of my shows. But tell us, Adam, I know you're only like 21, but what would you tell your 18-year-old self? What advice would you give them?
More of it is kind of learn to go with the flow a little bit. Like take some time to read what's going on and understand the situation a little bit better before just jumping in. Where angels fear to tread. So that's me. I've become, in my 2 years, I've become a little bit more grade from the singeing, and my children, and so yeah.
You do seem a lot chiller. You seem a little bit chiller lately, man. It could be because we haven't, had our ugly sweater party yet. I'm looking forward to that.
That'll be great.
You ready? You got it? You got your sweater? Okay. It's ugly sweater season, people. Let's go. All right, Adam. Well, thanks again for being on the show. It's great talking to you. And, anytime you want to come back, we got to make that happen.
All right. Anytime. Thank you, Jess. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Take care. Thank you for tuning in for this week's episode of the CISO Stories podcast. We want to say a special thank you to our sponsor, Fortinet. Please subscribe to the CISO Stories podcast, and you will receive a new story each Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll see you next week for a new episode.